As discussed in the introduction, this week we're looking at the first perspective of leadership, which is the leader as the individual. And we'll look at leadership traits and behaviours and styles and motivations. But prior to doing that, we'll look at a common sense perspective of leadership, the way that leadership gets transmitted into the social world. So how is leadership being transmitted into the social world? Is it something that the world sees as important? Well, that seems to be the case. In 2018, if you enter leadership development into Google, you get 636 million hits. The leadership development industry in 2015 seemed to be worth around about $31 billion. According to a Deloitte research report of 2016, when companies were asked how important leadership is to them, 89% chose either very important or important, and 57% of all companies said that leadership was very important to them. The word development is important, and you'll see why as we go further through these lessons. It's important because it makes us understand that leadership is not something that is fixed, not something that you're born into, not something that is natural. There's no fixed mindset of leadership. Instead, there's a growth mindset. It's something that if you spend your time on, if you spend your time learning about, and if you spend your time doing, you can get better and better at. There's a distinct difference between a fixed mindset in that you can't get beyond the levels of which you were born at, and a growth mindset in that you can grow into the task. However, although leadership is seen as very important, it doesn't seem as we're very good at it. Only 7% of companies say they're excellent at developing millennial leaders. Only 13% of companies suggest they're excellent at developing global leaders. And only 14% of companies have any succession planning in place for future leaders. It seems as if we're struggling to develop or find leaders. And the aim of this course is to follow the growth mindset and to help people develop themselves as leaders, so when their chance comes to lead, they're ready to do so. And importantly, we're going to frame this through the term know thyself. It's an understanding of knowing how you're going to lead. It's one of the original ideas of what it means to be human, going as far back as Socrates' time. To know thyself is to understand how you will act in various different situations. And it doesn't mean by knowing yourself that you just know a deep inner you. You might have multiple versions of yourself that act out in different ways in different situations. This is what we mean by adapting your leadership style. You might find you have multiple styles, multiple versions of you, and you can move between them fluidly without any psychological distress in your various leadership roles. Now, this can be quite a complex idea, the fact that you're not just one self but multiple selves adapting to different situations. So prior to going into these deeply complex issues, let's look at what the common sense perspective of leadership is and where you might be coming from. So at a commonsensical level, there seems to be 5 essential elements of leadership. The first of those is influencing. It's the idea that a leader influences and motivates followers to do their bidding or to go on some kind of transformational journey. The second relates to followers. In order to be a leader, you have to have some kind of follower. So there's this deep relationship between leader and a follower, and that's something that is absolutely required in order to be a good leader, to generate these good relationships with your followers and then yet again take them where you're going. Now, for some people, leadership just means you have a formal leadership position. But for others, we're having an idea of thought leadership and influences in the wider social world. These are people who are actually leading movements who don't really have any formal authority. They have a whole bunch of followers who are choosing to follow them. This is an important concept. You have leadership because you have the position of leadership or the position of authority, but you also have leadership where followers are choosing to follow you. And then we might have 3 very organisational elements of leadership. There's the idea of organisational objectives. How do you get people to do good work and deliver the objectives of the organisation? We then have the idea of change. How do you get people working in an organisation to adapt and change to the external environment? And finally, the idea of leading people themselves. And it goes back to relationships. How do you develop deep and enduring relationships with the people you are leading? So they are the 5 essential elements of leadership, the thing that all leaders actually are having to do on an ongoing basis. What are the 3 essential skills? You can think of them as sort of a hierarchy of skills, so that all leaders need to have technical skills, but then they will move up and have interpersonal skills, and finally, high-end leaders will have complex decision-making skills. So at the lowest end of the hierarchy is just the technical skills. It's the ability to understand the tools and methods to actually do a job and to lead other people in doing a job. As you lead more people, you need to have the interpersonal skills, the ability to communicate, to coach, to help, to build good relationships and enduring relationships with the people that you are leading. And finally, at the top of the hierarchy, you need to have these conceptual skills. You need to be able to conceptualize a situation, look at various strategies and alternatives, and decide in directions that the organisation needs to travel. So as you move beyond the commonsensical perspective of leadership, you're going to have to navigate your way through a whole bunch of theories, some of which might seem contradictory. To do that, you have to understand the difference between leadership theory classifications, and leadership paradigms. Leadership theory is an explanation of a specific aspect of leadership. It can help us understand, predict, and control successful leadership going forwards into the future. Then you have leadership theory classifications, and this might include leadership traits, leadership behaviours, leadership contingencies. And these will have models of leadership that help you understand how a leader is acting in total. Rather than just one element of leadership, it's a model of why and how a leader is behaving the way they are. Then you have leadership paradigms. This is a shared mindset that is a fundamental way of understanding, thinking, perceiving, and talking about leadership. As you go through the entire course, you will come across some theories, some different classifications, some different paradigms. Some of them, as I said, will seem contradictory. But because we're looking at the idea of you adapting your leadership style and being able to do that comfortably without any psychological distress, it's important that you understand the wide range of ideas and you can pick and choose between them as you go.